Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Chin-Quee Chats, the bite-sized podcast where we talk movies, sports, and everything in between. I'm your host, Matthew Chin-Quee, and this week I have a very special guest, Mr. Cole Weinstein. How are you doing, Cole?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm a new college student, so I'm still trying to figure that out. But it's been good so far. I'm enjoying it. It's busy, but I'm having a good time.
First year, how's it going so far? How do you like the experience transition?
It's kind of crazy. College is very much, I feel like a lot of people feel this way, kind of a love-hate relationship because it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
And it can be really difficult at times. And there's already been a lot of nights I had a real I don't even think I can call it a late night, a real late morning of doing stuff. But it's been fun, especially when the weekend comes. I'm ready to have a good time. College is cool. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, college is where you make your friends for life too. I mean, you'll always be friends with certain high school friends, but with your college friends, it's something else. You make some real lasting bonds here. So I'm really glad you're enjoying it so far.
For sure, thank you, man.
So we Cole and I are really big Richard Linklater fans. So that's what we kind of wanted to focus this episode on, at least the cinema chat segment. And then you can't really see the screen behind me, but he also has some football apparel there as well. And Cole is also a big NFL fan. And now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm not the biggest NFL fan. So we're going to try something new where Cole, aka the guest, tries to educate me a little bit about a certain subject in the free chat segment. But for now, we're going to get straight into the cinema chat, where we're going to talk about one of our favorite writer-directors, Richard Linklater. Now, Cole, what was your first exposure to Linklater, and can you explain just why you really are drawn to his films?
For sure. So my first ever exposure to him was back when I was really young, when my dad showed me parts of School of Rock. But what my real first introduction to Linklater, and the reason why I love him so much today, was when I saw Boyhood back in the summer of 2014. Boyhood's actually the movie that I really credit with making me into a cinephile. It really changed my life because I never thought that I could see a movie that was so different. It felt so different to me because it wasn't focused on being a movie. It was more focused on portraying and talking about life. And I was just so moved by the experience of this 2 hour and 45 minute long epic, just talking about childhood and youth, filled with these incredible performances that changed over time. Ethan Hawke's performance in that movie really moved me beyond what I thought I would have seen. And it's really the movie that started me getting into looking out for independent cinema. And I lived in LA at the time, so it was really easy for me to go to an art house theater and try to look out for these smaller films. I don't think I ever would have seen a film like Whiplash had I not seen Boyhood. And it was actually the movie that I started also looking up YouTube movie reviews. And I saw What the Flicks review and Chris Stuckman's review of Boyhood. And I got to sort of get involved in that community. And it's really the movie that helped make me into the cinephile I am today and made me appreciate Richard Linklater as this director who makes these movies that really feel so personal to me because they're very much these slice of life movies where people are just, they're talking about life. There's no real important plot, I guess. That's and plot is great. It's used in a lot of movies, but there's nothing that holds it down. It's just it's a movie that just talks about life. And I feel like whenever I watch his movies, especially his great ones, I become a lot more introspective about myself. And I love honest cinema that's able to let me open up a window to myself and look at my life. And I think that Linklater is easily the best at doing that. And Boyhood was a great introduction to that.
Yeah, and with the exception of a few, Linklater, I think that's one of his biggest strengths. He takes mundane subjects, such as just somebody growing up. And that's not to say that, growing up is mundane, but it doesn't really scream cinema, right? When you're talking about, we're just going to watch some kid grow up over 12 years. It doesn't scream something that'll be very entertaining, but he takes these mundane, these ideas and kind of crafts them into films and creates characters and dialogue that you just can't help but fall in love with. And Boyhood is a really a unique film in and of itself. The fact that it was filmed over 12 years, bringing back the same actors over that time. The actors themselves grew up during the filming of the movie. I think that's a really special film, and it's technically brilliant. I'm personally still not the biggest fan. It's my least favorite out of all the Linklater movies I've seen. But I'll never say that it's a bad movie just because of I know all the effort and all the massive technical achievement that it was putting that movie together. And I think that it's really cool that it was kind of the film that sparked your true love for film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I just to bring up what you said, I always think it's interesting when people, the biggest criticism about the movie is if it wasn't filmed over 12 years, it wouldn't be that special. And while I disagree with that because it still has incredible performances and Linklater's beautiful script and insane editing, I think it's the best edited film of all time. It still blows me away how they were able to take 12 years and just seamlessly put that together. And even so, even if it was all at the same time wrapping this narrative together. But the thing is, it did take 12 years. It's it's like saying the Great Wall of China wouldn't be as impressive if it wasn't as long or if it wasn't as big, because this is how it happened, and it's a remarkable achievement. It also happens to be an incredibly moving movie filled with really incredible performances. I know some people don't like his performance, but I think Eller Coltrane, who plays the main character Mason, is incredible throughout. I love his performance. I love the character that he becomes, and I think everyone in that movie is incredible. I think it's really just such a special film, and I rewatched it the night before I graduated high school, and it just really hit me in a place where I think Linklater intended, where it allows you to look at your own life while being a part of this family. And after 2 hours and 45 minutes, you don't want to go. You want to stay and be a part of this world because Linklater created these incredible characters.
Yeah, out of all the characters in that film, I think Patricia Arquette's character is my absolute favorite. The journey she goes on and how it's not a super Hollywood life that she lives. She makes mistakes, and she makes the same mistakes, and she has, in a lot of family drama movies, you have like the perfect parent, and she's most definitely not the perfect parent. She makes mistakes. She has her own issues in the film. She deals with a bunch of other things that are kind of weighing her down. But at the end of the day, she's still, a great parent, a great mom, and a great person. And then on the other hand, you have Ethan Hawke, who is a frequent Richard Linklater collaborator. And we'll get to the Before trilogy eventually, because that's my favorite of Linklater's works. But in Boyhood, you're absolutely right. The characters that he crafted, and whether or not you connected with them, part of the reason I didn't really love Boyhood as much as I wanted to is because I couldn't really see myself in the experiences that were currently going on in that film. But he did create characters that if you're just watching them, you're like, oh yeah, I definitely could have seen them on the street. These are real. These aren't fake. These aren't Hollywood. This is as almost as real as it gets in movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Ethan Hawke's character in that movie really blew me away because I'm assuming we can go into spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're first introduced to that character, I still remember in that theater 3 or so years ago. Just when Ethan Hawke's character is introduced, that silent groan just from the entire audience, because the way Linklater portrays him or makes it seem, and what I love about Boyhood is that it subverts expectations, is any other movie would have made Ethan Hawke's character the deadbeat dad.
Yeah.
And it would have been so simple and so cut and dry, but he's not. And I love the line in the Honest trailer about Boyhood where they're like, Patricia Arquette ends up marrying all these actual deadbeat guys. Some of them are good-hearted. Her second husband, the military husband, he has a good heart, but he's got some issues too. And they say she should have just stayed with Ethan Hawke. He wasn't that bad. And he ends up developing into this really, really good father, just not like how a real life person would. he's not perfect. He's not cut and dry. He's very much, he has to learn and sort of become the father he needs to be, because they had Mason and his sister so young. And I think that it's really powerful to see his character portrayed with such care and in such a real life way that I think most movies wouldn't have done. Most movies would have just been lazy and had her sort of be the good flawed parent, and then him just be the deadbeat dad. And it was nice to see a really full representation of really interesting characters from both of them that were really multidimensional.
Yeah, a lot of the movies would take Patricia Arquette's character and make her, the woman scorned, the single mom who has to struggle through everything. And you're right, it did. At first, it seemed like when you first run into Mason Sr., it seems like he's going to be a deadbeat dad. And then you get scenes like when they're camping around the campfire, him and Mason Jr. talking about Star Wars and music. And you realize, hey, this guy isn't such a bad guy. He may not be with the kids all that often, but his heart is always in the right place, and at the end of the day, he is a good dad. And I really like that about Boyhood. Now there's another set of films that aren't the Before trilogy, but are kind of related to each other, and that's Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some. And I know that you love Everybody Wants Some, but let's
absolutely
kind of bring it back first. And have you seen Dazed and Confused, the
I have.
predecessor?
It's one of my favorites of all time. It's Boyhood and and Everybody Wants Some are. Everybody Wants Some is my favorite. Boyhood's my second favorite, and Dazed and Confused would be my third favorite. If I haven't really sat down and made an official top 10, top 20 all time, but Dazed and Confused would be my top 15, and Everybody Wants Some and Boyhood would be in my top 10. I love all those movies dearly. I joke that Dazed and Confused is the movie that helped me get into college, because I wrote an essay on the American Dream about Dazed and Confused my junior year, which was a huge essay that got me an A in that class and probably helped me get into college. And I wrote about Dazed and Confused and American Beauty to talk about the American Dream. And I think Dazed and Confused is a really, really interestingly rich movie that's, I think, a lot deeper than people give it credit for. Same thing with Everybody Wants Some. I think both movies can be enjoyed on a very surface level, but below the surface, there's this really great commentary on growing up. And I think
I agree.
Dazed and Confused has this incredible allegory that I don't think a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, Dazed and Confused, it has its moments that at its core, it's a party movie. You throw it on, you're watching these high school kids go have a party, and these kids who are you're right, they're growing up and they're learning to transition into a new environment. That's sort of the line still follows there with Everybody Wants Some as well. But Dazed and Confused, it has behind the moments of drinking and doing drugs and just doing all sorts of crazy things, you have little character moments here and there where people are talking and just one-on-one or just as groups, and you get those deeper I don't want to say a deeper message, but an exploration into characters and exploration into just life itself. And you see that in almost every Linklater movie, from Boyhood, like we were talking. You get those smaller moments from Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some. From the Before trilogy, you get those moments of Linklater dialogue where it's exploring just life, and he captures life just so well.
Yeah, I think Dazed and Confused is actually a film. I don't know if deeper meaning is the right word. I guess it would be. I think very much so. Linklater uses sort of this allegory for the American Revolution, and like the bicentennial year, the 1976, to talk about the experiences of high school and this want of Pink, the main character, to like break free from this society that's really treating him well. And I think it's a really interesting commentary on high school, because he's so miserable in high school, even though he's the star quarterback and everyone loves him. And he has to sign this dumb sheet of paper saying that he's not going to drink when half the team signed it and they said they're just not going to listen to it. Mm-hmm. But for some reason he's so wrapped up behind it, and it really struck me how the scene where the teacher telling all the kids as they're leaving school for the year that the founding fathers were just a bunch of aristocratic white males who owned slaves and just didn't want to pay their taxes. And that really struck a chord with me because it's really Linklater making this comparison between the founding fathers and why they rebelled against Britain to Pink to why he's rebelling against this high school society that he seems to be miserable in, yet he has everything. And I think it's a really profound, deeper look into a movie that is often just looked at as a party movie or a hangout movie, when it definitely works as that, but it's I think it works deeper as this really interesting study of what it's like to grow up, which is what I think Linklater does best.
Yeah, these two movies, Dazed and Confused and Everybody Wants Some, I think they perfectly capture the mix of something that would be kind of like a more auteurs movie, like a Darren Aronofsky movie that has, explores other things other than just pure entertainment value, while also still having pure entertainment value. You can get the best of both worlds in Linklater's films, especially these two. And I guess to an extent, School of Rock and some of his other films that I haven't seen yet. But he perfectly blends that sense of entertainment and, cinema, quote unquote cinema, for the audiences. Now, I don't necessarily think that Everybody Wants Some, in terms of its messages, is as strong. But what I really love, and I'm sure you're gonna go back
I very much think that it's a very deep film as well.
I'm not gonna disagree that it isn't a very deep film, but I don't think that the writing itself and in terms of exploring the messages, it's not as strong as Dazed and Confused, but I will say that it captures college life really well, especially meeting people who are gonna remain your best friends for a long time, like we were just kind of talking about before, and that sense of brotherhood, and of course the parties, and and that's what Everybody Wants Some is really good at. It perfectly, and I don't know how long the movie is, but within it's 2 hours or something like that. It sums up your first Frosh week. It sums up college.
Oh, absolutely. It really struck a chord with me, and just thinking about it now that I've been in college, because I saw it back in high school, and it sort of gave me. I knew that that's not what college would be like, but I knew that it hit the right beats as to what college was. And I think it so captures that first weekend where you don't have any classes and you're still trying to figure out what you're doing, so well, because, it just, I can't really even put into words how much I love this movie, because not only is it so immensely entertaining and rewatchable, and since it came out in 2016, I've seen it 10 times and have never been bored by it. It's filled with this incredible dialogue and banter and really brilliant casting. And these guys who Linklater casted are starting to become stars, which I really appreciate, because I'm rooting for every single one of them, because I love this movie so dearly. But I love the themes that this movie captures, and when you juxtapose it to Dazed and Confused, because I really don't think thematically they're very similar movies. I think Dazed and Confused is kind of a downer movie that kind of ends on a kind of a somber note with his kids getting in trouble and Pink winning the football team, and you can tell he's kind of throwing his life away a little bit, and sort of just this like oppressive nature that high school is, and how these kids are just trying to escape and have a good time despite everything around them that they don't like. But you don't get that feeling from Everybody Wants Some. Sure, Everybody Wants Some is before classes start, and you obviously have the iconic ending scene where Jake's falling asleep in his lecture,
which I
guess resonated with me a little bit.
That is so accurate. I just came back from a class where I basically slept through it. So
yeah, and like the massive lecture halls, and it's like finding your friend on the first day and being like, hey, we hung out, let's sit together. Yeah. I love all that. But it so captures what the weekend is like in college and having a good time with your friends. And sort of personally, I got a big group of guys together, and we all watched the McGregor-Mayweather fight in my first weekend before classes. And that so resonated to me because it was just hanging out with all these new guys that you met and really having a bond or starting to create a bond that's beyond sort of the superficial high school stuff. That's really feels permanent and feels much more real, and just feeling like, okay, this is my life now. Like I'm having a good time, and this is something new for me. And I can go deeper into the many sort of mini scenes of subtext that this movie has, because I could talk to you about that for hours, because I think that there's a lot of stuff below the surface in this movie, and some really great messages on competition and masculinity and who you are and discovering yourself. And even the title, Everybody Wants Some, just wanting to just grab the world and just take your piece of it. And I think there's so much to that movie, and it's why I love it so much. And while it doesn't have this insane overarching allegory that Dazed and Confused has, which I don't think many films do, and if a film has it, very few do it well, it still has so much for everyone. And I think it's one of those movies where I've joked, I think it's impossible. I always just thought it would be impossible to give that movie a rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, because I feel like it's such a good time that you have to at least think that it's a fun movie. And I'm shocked by people who said they don't think it's fun. You don't have to love it like I do, because I think very few people do. But it's such a good time. I don't know how you couldn't just enjoy watching the craziness that's going on screen.
If I put myself in some of in the shoes of someone who's given it rotten, I think that if I really try, I can see maybe somebody who maybe had a negative experience in college, and this may come off as humble bragging, come from us too. But I think maybe if they didn't have fun, maybe they were a little bit bitter. I don't know. I'm not even going to try to call those people out or try to understand. But yeah, I agree with Everybody Wants Some. The type of bonds that you make, especially in this film. And personally, what I really love in films, and this can be seen throughout, my top 20 list, is I love when a film can take characters and surround them with, the main character, and surround them with supporting characters, guys that have your back, guys that will always be there, guys that'll give you shit when you do stupid stuff, but when it comes down to it, they're there for you. And I really love that type of brotherly bond or sisterly bond in the films. Now, really quick, we're running out of time in the Cinema Chat segment. I did say we were going to talk about the Before trilogy, and sure. I know I really love this. I really love this trilogy. What are your thoughts on it? Really quick, we're running out of time.
I think that I really, really love the first one. I think the third one is incredible. I think it's the best of the three. It's probably my fourth favorite Linklater movie, Before Midnight. I think Sunrise starts off a little slow, but has these really, really beautiful moments and talks so much about falling in love, and really examines sort of this aspect of life that's really integral to the human experience. I need to rewatch the middle one, Before Sunset, because I didn't like it as much. I thought it was a little slower. I didn't resonate as much with the conversation that they were having, because that movie is all conversation. So
that's all it is.
Be on board with that. And I didn't resonate as much with the conversation in that one until sort of the last 20 minutes of that movie. So I need to rewatch that one. But I think it's really this beautiful trilogy that, once again, it's realistic. It's almost meta in a sense that humans sort of, because they've seen these sort of perfect love stories in movies, that they're almost looking for that themselves. Mm-hmm. So when they find something like that, like Ethan Hawke and Julia Delpy do, they try to I don't even know how to explain it. They fall in love in a sort of fairy tale way, but it's realistic too, mm-hmm. because there's strife between them throughout the whole movie. They're constantly sort of on edge with each other, and it's a process. It's growing pains, but there's still these sort of beautiful moments. I think it's really a masterful trilogy by a master of cinema himself, Linklater.
I think what you said in regards to Boyhood here really applies with these films. He breaks the trope. I mean, at the very first movie, in Sunrise, Jessley and Celine, they meet eyes, they lock eyes on a train, and normally in a rom-com movie, it's like love at first sight, and then the guy talks to the girl, and then they're off to the races, they're in love, they're getting married, stuff like that. And the movie starts like that, but then it kind of shows you what happens in between there. They're talking and they're not agreeing on everything. They're not exactly 100% a perfect match. Jesse himself is a cynic and Celine is, she's a hopeless romantic. Although Jesse is really just a cynic pretending, or a romantic pretending to be a cynic. But then as you continue on this journey with Sunrise and Midnight, and I really think that these films are you have to see them really back to back. I mean, I guess Sunrise, it can really stand on its own, but Sunset and Midnight, especially Midnight and the way that movie ends, you have to kind of experience it all together and go on this journey. It really it reflects romance in today's modern society. It's not everything's perfect and not everything's going to end this, and end the way you want it to end in a Hollywood way. And Linklater is really good at just saying, I'm not going to do this the Hollywood way. I'm going to do this the way it is in real life. And I'm making a movie that reflects reality rather than reflects the reality we want in our heads.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything that you're saying. I think it's important, though, that he does include those Hollywood moments, because or not Hollywood moments, but those really beautiful, true romantic moments that do exist in life, because it's very much, he toes that balance, because he's not a cynic. He's not someone who's like, love's not realistic, let's show how all the reasons why it doesn't work. He very much takes a realistic approach at it. And I love so much that after the second two, it wasn't in Sunrise, but in Sunset and Midnight, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy are credited as scriptwriters, because they workshopped the script so much together. And Linklater is really a guy who loves to workshop with his actors script-wise. Going back to Everybody Wants Some really quickly, he worked with, because that movie's incredible, he worked for weeks with his actors to make sure that they were all comfortable with the lines and they all liked the lines. And the actors would all give each other like lines that if they thought that they didn't have as big of a role. So that way they made sure that everyone was comfortable with the lines that they were saying, and it really felt like they were part of the creative process. And I love that Linklater is such an actor's director, because it shows, because he gets incredible performances out of oftentimes unknowns.
Yeah, that's another strength of Linklater. On top of his directing, on top of his writing, he gets incredible chemistry from all his actors, and every single movie I've seen. And whether or not I like the film, I can look at the actors and say these guys are legitimately friends. Or, chemistry even exists between antagonists and protagonists. Like, these guys are legitimately don't like each other, sort of thing. Like, he gets the best performances out of the actors as possible. And as you said, in the case of the Before trilogy, it got to the point where Hawke and Delpy were inputting what they believed their characters would say, because they knew each other well enough and they knew their characters well enough to try to shape the story as they see, as they believed where it would go. But we have gone over time on the cinema chat, so we're going to take a really quick break and then come back to Cole trying to teach me about the NFL and what goes on for there. So we'll be right back. And we are back for the free chat segment, and this is something that I have never tried before, so hopefully this is going to go well. But Cole is, like many Americans, loves American football, loves the NFL, whereas I have never really gotten that into it. I know the rules of football for the most part. There's probably a million little things that I don't know, but generally I know it. But I don't know the landscape of the league right now, and who's the best teams, who's really bad, and who's rebuilding, sort of thing. So Cole, do you think you can give me a rundown real quick of the current landscape and the NFL's in?
Absolutely, and you forgot to mention that we're in a fantasy league together.
I forgot about that.
Which is, I think, your first time playing fantasy football.
It is.
Funny enough, my team is actually named Everybody Wants Some, a pun off of J.J. Watt's name and my favorite Linklater movie, Everybody Wants Some. For sure. The NFL's been interesting because, especially last week, was maybe one of the greatest just slate of games that we'd ever seen. 5 games went down to the wire in the early slate of games, and it was incredible to watch as a football fan, because really the reason why I love the NFL so much is that incredible drama that can come from sports, and I think it's a great conduit for drama because all the games are so urgent. And the NFL's been interesting this year because I think the biggest storyline has been whether or not Tom Brady, the quarterback of the Patriots, is getting too old, and whether or not this is his last year. And he struggled in the first week against the Chiefs, who are one of the NFL's two undefeated teams. So losing against them wasn't really a big knock against them. But since then, Brady's gone off and he's scored 36 points against the Saints, and he's scored a lot against the Houston Texans. I'm looking for the score right now. He 36 against the Texans as well with this incredible final drive comeback to beat the Texans. And Brady's showing right now that he's still got it. He's physically deteriorating a little bit because he's 39, 40, getting up there in age, but he's still performing at a level that most quarterbacks could never do. So that's a really, really interesting storyline. Another one to bring back the Chiefs. Them and the Atlanta Falcons, I believe, are the NFL's only two undefeated teams. And that's interesting because the Falcons were the Super Bowl team last year who lost to the Patriots, famously up by 25 points, losing to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And there was a lot of questions about the Falcons because their offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan, is now the head coach in San Francisco, and people were wondering if that was going to slow down Atlanta's offense at all, if their quarterback Matt Ryan was really succeeding because of Kyle Shanahan. But so far, that doesn't look to be the case. The Falcons are scoring a lot of points, and they're a really good-looking team, and they're undefeated right now, and they're in the lead in their division. And then the Chiefs are really coming on. They've always been a really good regular season team under their head coach Andy Reid, who before Kansas City was great in Philadelphia, back with Donovan McNabb, who is a Syracuse grad, to pimp out my college a little bit. And they're looking really interesting this year. They've always been a talented team, but their rookie running back, Kareem Hunt, who I want to say he was taken in the later rounds of the NFL draft out of Toledo, is tearing the league up. He, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but his yards from scrimmage is the second, if through the first three games, is the second most in NFL history, behind Billy Sims, who was a Detroit running back in the 60s. So what he's doing is historic stuff. He did play for Toledo. I want to look at his stats right now. People are kind of baffled by how good he is playing right now. He just had 172 yards against my Chargers, which hurt a little bit, but he's tearing up the league. He's averaging 8.5 yards a carry, which a great running back averages 5 yards a carry. Mm-hmm. He's at 8 right now, which is almost unheard of. That's college football numbers. That's incredible. He has 401 yards rushing and 137 yards receiving, which through 3 games is insane. He's tearing the league up right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how defenses adapt to him. And as we get more film on him, how he's going to change. His numbers will inevitably slow down because this does happen with rookies. Never at this rate, but because the NFL is so predicated on film study and really figuring out players, when you don't have that film study to figure out a guy's tendencies, you can't game plan around them. So they're kind of able to run free, which is interesting. Another sort of interesting aspect of the NFL is their global expansion and playing games in London every year. It doesn't feel like to me, because this has been the earliest that we've had back-to-back weeks in London. I believe the Dolphins and the Saints are playing in London this week, and the Jaguars, who have usually been historically not a very good team, just dominated the Baltimore Ravens. It must have been 44-7 in London, and the Ravens were a team that were thought to have a really good defense. So that was interesting, and it's always interesting to see how these London games affect teams, because football is such a physical sport, and it's so predicated, like a lot of sports are, on routine.
Yeah. But
even more so because it's a week-long routine than, say, the NBA, where you can't practice hard every game, especially when you have back-to-back games. It's a different mentality. But in football, it's so predicated on routine, and when you're getting uprooted to a different time zone, it's tough enough to go from the West Coast to the East Coast or vice versa, but to go from the West Coast to London is brutal, or the East Coast to London. And the Jaguars have been doing it for so many years. They're kind of thought of as London's team almost. They've announced draft picks from there because Their owner has a very good relationship in London. They're more used to it than the Ravens are, which really showed. Yeah, so that was a really interesting thing going on. Let's see what else.
How indicative of how the rest of the season's gonna go out are the first. I mean, I think we're in week 4 now. Like, how are the first few weeks? How indicative is it? Kind of like in baseball, where a team like the Baltimore Orioles this past MLB season, they were super hot at the beginning, and now they're not even in. They're knocked out of the playoffs. Like, how indicative of it, and how because it's a shorter season, like, does it have any effect? Are the teams that are undefeated usually the ones that make the playoffs, or how does it go?
Yeah, it's interesting because oftentimes, especially in these first few weeks of the NFL season, the first few games don't matter as much because, like in any sport, the bad teams believe they're going to be contenders, so they play as hard as they can. Whereas if you're 1-7 and you're Cleveland, you're not going to think that you're not going to try as hard is the wrong word, but you don't have that belief that this could be your year like you do when you're, say, 0-2 or 1-2 and you're still fighting. So these first few games aren't as indicative, I guess, of who's ultimately going to be making a run in January and making a run for the Super Bowl. But because the NFL is so urgent and there's only 16 games, and I think I've done the math before, that one NFL game, as far as the season goes, like the percentage of the season, is worth the winning streak that Cleveland just had. Like,
That's
it's
nuts.
worth one NFL game is worth like 20 games in baseball if we're looking at percentage of the season. And so it does matter. Like, if you start out 3-0, you have a huge advantage because 10 wins usually makes you to the playoffs. You're a third of the way there, and the season is not even a fourth of the way through. So going 3-0, and usually the teams that do start off undefeated are the teams that are the high-ranking seeds and the best teams in the playoffs. Every once in a while you have a team. I don't remember what year, but the Giants had a major meltdown where they were 6-0 and they ended up going 8-8 and missing the playoffs. But usually, especially with teams right now, the two teams that are undefeated, the Chiefs and the Falcons, have proven that they're playoff teams. And the Chiefs have made the playoffs every year for like the past, since Andy Reid's been their head coach. So I think that very much matters. But Jacksonville is 2-1 right now. And that's going to be interesting to see because they very much had a hot start, but I don't know what I believe in them as far as their culture, because in the NFL and a lot of sports, culture matters, and the owner matters, and they've been shown to not have that great culture in the past. But who knows? Their head coach, actually, once again, to give my school some props, former Syracuse football head coach Doug Marrone, doing a good job with them. So we miss him here at Syracuse, but he's doing good things in Jacksonville. So I'm rooting for him, and it's going to be interesting to see what they're doing because their quarterback Blake Bortles, who's had an atrocious preseason, has been known to throw a lot of interceptions, is a guy who he's playing okay. And they're letting this Jacksonville team that really built this team off of free agents, they're finally starting to gel together. Because that's the other interesting thing about the NFL is that, and a lot of other sports, that the difference between, I guess, homegrown talent and guys that you're drafting versus free agency. And in baseball, there's not really a cap. In basketball, you can go over the cap, but there's so much money that every player's getting their due. In football, the cap really matters because there's so many guys, and each guy really plays an integral piece to the bigger picture, that if you're spending $15 million on a pass rusher, that's a lot of money that you could be spending elsewhere to help shore up your team. And really, ultimately, no player is going to have that insane of an impact unless they're the quarterback. Like, pass rusher is widely considered to be one of the most important positions in the NFL. The Chargers pass rusher, Melvin Ingram, he's their defensive end, has 5.5 sacks through 3 games. He's having a monster season. He was just named the AFC Player of the Month. He's playing incredible, and the Chargers are 0-3, sadly. They've been playing close games, and he's had an impact on the game, but ultimately, you need to have the team playing well together, and you need to have the quarterback playing well. And it's all got to come together. It's such a game, really is. It is a game of inches. And so such little things matter. To talk about my Chargers a little bit, because for anyone who knows me, they know that it wouldn't be a football podcast if I didn't talk about the Chargers. They they lost their first 2 games, one off of a field goal that if they'd made in week 2, they would have won the game. And then if their field goal wasn't blocked in week 1, they would have gone to overtime and had the momentum to probably win the game. They could have been 2-1, and now they're 0-3 and have objectively, I guess, tied for the worst record in the NFL. So it really could be so different, and football is so much about fighting through and making it count in the moments when you need it to. In basketball or baseball, you can lose a game here and there. You can miss a final shot, but in football, every game is so important. I think I love the game itself, but I think that's why I love football so much, is because every moment matters. And I think the same thing with the draw of March Madness is that it's one and done. Every game matters. Absolutely. Whereas in basketball or baseball, the seasons are long and like the playoffs are a series, which I get. It's ultimately, if you're looking at sports from a more scientific, empirical perspective, you want to see, who the best team is. And that matters more. But there's a reason why Game 7s are such a big deal in baseball and basketball. But in the NFL, in the regular season, oftentimes every game kind of feels like a Game 7. But especially in the playoffs, every game matters and every moment matters. And there's something really, really great about that. And that's why I love football. Any other things that you want to know sort of about the league? Or
I just wanted to make some comments about what you've been saying. I mean, there's a saying in baseball, and you lose a few April games, it's still early, it doesn't really matter. And then the games that are really only matter are the August and September ones, where I guess in the NFL it's every game is almost a playoff experience type of game, because when you only have 16 games, you can't afford to lose more than 4 or 5 or whatever, how many you are allowed to lose. And you don't want to just kind of rest guys. That's something that's been happening in the NBA. But in terms of, kind of talking about resting and superstar players, how's the parity in the NFL? Because I know that I had heard that a lot of people were predicting that the Patriots would go back. Is that a common thing? Is it lopsided like it is in the NBA right now with like the Cavs and the Warriors? Is there something like that in the NFL?
I think the NFL has the perfect balance, because ultimately it is a sport of parity in that different teams make the playoffs every year. And because it's do or die in every playoff game, if you're in the playoffs, you legitimately have a shot to win. If you're the 7th seed in the NBA playing against the 2nd seed, or, the A seed playing against the 1st seed, and you're going up against the Warriors and you're Utah, you have no chance to make it past the first round. Whereas in the NFL, anything can happen. 6 seeds, which is the lowest seed, win the Super Bowl. Not all the time, but it definitely happens. It's happened a few times this decade. And that's what I do like about football, is that there is parity in that you can get into the playoffs and then you can make a run. But ultimately, there are the top quarterbacks are the guys who are winning the games and ultimately winning the championships. I saw a statistic that I think Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, and Joe Flacco are the only quarterbacks in the AFC to make it to the Super Bowl in like the past 20 years or something like that, or since the early 2000s, because they're all really, really good, great quarterbacks. Flacco is, I guess, sort of the outlier there. He's inconsistent, but like Brady for the Patriots, Ben for the Steelers, and Manning back when he was playing for the Colts and Broncos were these really elite quarterbacks who ultimately changed the game and made their teams the best they could be. And you really see that with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, where last week when they were playing the Bengals, the Packers were playing horrible football for the first 3 quarters, but because Aaron Rodgers is just so talented and just so good at the game that he plays, he was able to lead them back. And ultimately, football is so much of a quarterback-driven sport. I heard this comparison once that I really thought would be interesting, is if you made baseball a 25-game season or a 16-game season, the pitcher would have a similar impact that the quarterback does. In that it's a position that controls the game so much, but because there's so much baseball and the pitcher can only play once a week, it's more about the pitching staff than the actual one pitcher. But even a guy like Kershaw can lead the Dodgers to the playoffs every year. They clearly have a lot of talent, just like Patriots teams in the past and Colts teams in the past have had. but ultimately it's that guy who carries a team and leads them to the playoffs and gets them those lead wins. But then also, like Peyton Manning, who's had his fair share of playoff struggles, just like Kershaw has, when you struggle in the playoffs as that kind of a marquee guy, it's hard for the team to rally together and win without you. And I think I think it is interesting because parity very much exists in the NFL, but I think ultimately it's due to the playoff system that teams with parity, that the teams that get in sort of on the fringes can make a huge impact. So the NFL is a game of parity, but I think it's the right amount of parity. It's not like basketball where you have two teams making it every year.
Yeah, I have. I mean, that's a whole issue for another time. My issue with the seeding in the NBA, because I think it should be, according to record, a 1-16 seeds rather than conferences, especially with how lopsided the conference is. But that's a whole other thing. And I think it's really interesting. The picture you painted for the quarterback, there really isn't that type of in the two sports that I watch, and including hockey, a lot of these other sports, there really isn't that guy or that position that really makes such of a difference. I mean, you have the outliers, like you have a LeBron James, who, if you put him on any team, they'll make it to the playoffs. But even looking going back to baseball, you can have a Mike Trout, and that team won't make it to the playoffs. And I think he's made it to the playoffs once, and he may be the best player in the world right now, but there isn't. If you have one of the best quarterbacks, you can make it. Like, as you said, you can make it into the playoffs. So I think it's cool that the NFL has that one position. If you really load up, or if you really put someone great at that position, he just goes and makes everybody better. But yeah, I don't think I have any other questions. But you have certainly gotten me a lot more interested, in keeping up with the NFL, which is something that I have been meaning to try to get into for a while. But we are also at a time, so I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast, Cole. Do you have any shout outs? Anything you'd like to plug?
No, not really. Thank you so much for having me on. I guess if I were to say anything, I'd say go Syracuse. I love my school. Syracuse is very proud of the orange and just the school that we have, and I'm really enjoying it so far. And college has been awesome, and I'm rooting for them on Saturdays, and I'm excited to see them play NC State tomorrow. And I'm praying for my Chargers. They're 0-3 right now, but I still have hope. I still think this could be the year. We got a lot of talent. Besides that, you can check me out on Twitter at CWein21, CWEIN 21, and on Instagram at the same spot. And yeah, just keep the Chargers in your thoughts. Pray for them. All right.
And I'll put those links in the bottom below in the description, or wherever you find this. If you guys made it all the way to the end of this long episode, thank you for listening. As always, you guys can find me on Twitter at Chin-Quee96, and then the podcast Twitter, CQ_chats. Make sure you check out the other shows on the Geek Pulse Radio Network, including the Geek Pulse Radio Show, where I got accused of hating giraffes, and I do not hate giraffes. I love them. That fighting giraffes question was purely hypothetical, but if you were to fight one, Chris Clow, it is not the right thing to approach it to the front. You have to take its legs out and then climb on its back. That's the way you do it. If you guys don't really get that, if you guys will watch the latest community episode. But yeah, that's about it. Until next week, I'll chat with you guys later.
Some might not be aware that a giraffe can reach speeds of almost 40 miles per hour, or that it's capable of delivering a fatal front kick. Never approach on foot, because even a motor vehicle doesn't guarantee your safety. There's no precise formula for how deep a giraffe's defensive perimeter is, but with all the reported incidents, it's clearly being violated on occasion.